All right, there's been a little bit of to-do over the fact that the patch notes are just like a little bit late to be mid-season, but I mean, we've got them now, so let's have a look. So this is the 4.1.0 patch coming out today, so we'll be able to play this later on. And let's get right into the changes, because that's what it starts with. We've got the arrow spray getting an ink consumption buff. This is so hilariously irrelevant. Like, you can very easily farm special with the main weapon of this thing on, like, the RG, for example, before you even hit, like, your sub-weapon line. It already only takes a single ink tank to get your special very quickly. So it did not have a problem with this. This is not what's making the main weapon weak. This is not going to change much. Now this is interesting. And this as well. These two weapons were already not bad, and they are going to be better. The other thing about the Splatter Shot, just spoilers for later, is Zooka also got buffed. And we'll talk about that later. This might be a Splatter Shot meta. Like, I'm never good at these kinds of predictions, but, like, people are going to at least consider that. That's nuts. So first of all, they improved the scatter of shots while on land, and they also buffed the scatter shot reduction from intensify action. Mid-air ink scatter will now be closer to the effect while shooting on land. So I think you need intensify action to buff the jump shots, but the ground shots you're getting for free. That might be a misread of this. It's just, they did a similar buff to the Luna Blaster, and it got 3 separate bullet points, whereas this one only got 2. So I'm assuming that there's some aspect of the Luna Blaster that got buffed that didn't get buffed here. But a lot can easily get lost in translation. Maybe it says the same thing, and they just got translated at 2 different times, and it means 2 different things. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. But this is a pretty big deal, because this is one of the weakest parts of the Splatter Shot. Like, one of the reasons that you like a splash over a Splatter Shot right now is the accuracy. And this is going to close the gap pretty significantly. So that could be a really big combat buff that makes this worth considering a bit more. Now, one thing that's also worth considering, and I move more down towards the NZAP side of things, because again, same buff happened here. One thing that's also worth considering is that the more the shots scatter, the better it paints. The Splatter Shot was already more of the Slayer variant of these shooters, so I don't think that's as big of an impact for it, but the Zap is more of a support weapon. It's farming for coolers, so this will somewhat nerf its special output, not by a whole lot, but I think the combat potential that it's getting back from it is worth more than you would get from the weapon being inaccurate. You generally do like the accuracy more, and, you know, you got something like the Splash, which paints just fine with perfect accuracy, so it's not like it's hurting that much for it, but that is a little bit of a side grade, but it's a diagonally upward side grade, you know? So this weapon in particular, the 85, was seeing significant competitive use. It was like the backbone of a lot of team comps. And now it's just going to be better at fighting than it was before. So people are, if anything, only more likely to choose it. This weapon was seeing some niche use cases, but a lot of people were not, you know, liking how inconsistent Zooka could be sometimes. And I don't think that's going to be a problem anymore, but we'll talk about that in a second. Splatter Shot Pro, they're giving it a paint buff, which is nice. So the radius of the ink splatter when it lands is going to be increased, so it's going to put more paint on the ground. So hopefully that'll be a little bit better at painting the map and a little bit better at getting its special. It's paint or paint output or something, it's ink efficiency. These are things that this weapon genuinely does need, so that's a buff in the right direction. I think it's going to take a lot before we actually see these being used in competitive play, unless the Forge Pro randomly just gets Booyah Bombs a lot faster now. That might be worth considering, but it's definitely never been a favorite in competitive play, and primarily because of, like, ink consumption issues. Not since, the Splatoon 2 meta where we were running a lot of K-Pro. Luna Blaster, they're drastically reducing the shot scatter in midair, which is nice. I don't think that's going to change the main weapon's place on the tier lists all that much. Because jump shotting, you've got such a wide radius that people were already doing this anyway. This was already just a way that you played the weapon, was jump shotting and not really caring that it's less accurate because your big blast radius is going to do all the work for you. So, not a huge difference, but the Luna Blaster players will probably appreciate it. Dynamo reduced the amount of time... I'm scrolling up too far. Reduced the amount of time it takes for the ink to begin recovering after a swing. I don't think this is the main problem the main weapon has. I don't think that's going to make a huge difference in combat. It's going to be nice for ink efficiency reasons. It's going to be able to stay in place if it's not shoved out pretty well. And it already paints decently well, so that's not too bad. But, I don't think this is the main problem with the weapon. Still, it's a buff. I mean, they'll take it. Dynamo has needed some positive attention for some time. Paintbrush. You reduce the amount of ink consumed by swinging the brush and also by holding it to paint while moving. So just a 25% across the board ink consumption buff. And I don't think that was the main problem with that weapon either. Those two weapons are kind of held back by frame data more than anything. GooTuber, it's easier to tell when it's going to hit 100 damage, which... cool, but if you're playing GooTuber, you probably already know that pretty well. You probably already have a really good feel for that. That's probably the thing that you're practicing while you're in the lobby. And it doesn't fix any of the weapons' problems in competitive play, so I don't think that's going to be very impactful. Bloblobber increased the range of ink splatter at the point of impact and from ink sprays. This is a general painting buff for the Bloblobber, which I don't think it's undeserved. The Bloblobber in Splatoon 2 was much more of a paint support. And it feels like it kind of lost a little bit of that identity for some reason in Splatoon 3, where it just wasn't doing as good a job of that. So it's got a little bit more of its niche back. Will this be enough? It still has the problem where it's really poor in combat because its effective range... it can hit stuff really far away, but that's if they stand still for long enough, or if they blunder into it. And if they don't do those things... then they just dodge the shots because they're so slow. Shot velocity is really the biggest problem the Bloblobber has. So, again, I don't think that's going to be too impactful, but it's nice for it to have, and it may give it a little bit more of its supportive role back. Tri-Stringer has gotten buffs. We've got the damage from shots that explode while on the ground going up from 28 to 30. While that isn't a huge improvement, it's still going to 4-shot. It is going to combo with more things. So if something does 70 damage, for example, if someone gets hit by a Stamper Charge Slash, then this will combo with that now, as opposed to barely not splatting. So there are some thresholds that hits, which is nice for it. And movement speed while charging and while fully charged. This was painfully slow, and that's not kind of what you're really using it for. So I don't know how impactful that's going to be, but it's probably going to feel nice for maybe getting out of certain situations. So, can't hurt. Sprinkler extended the duration of the state where ink is strongest immediately after placing by approximately 3 seconds. So, it's going to paint better for longer, basically. That's nice for its supportive utility, and maybe for its combat utility a little bit. Angle Shooter goes for 35 to 40. That is a really big increase because, for example, Burst Bomb Directs do 60 damage. So this actually combos with a Burst Bomb Direct now. And there are weapons that say do 30 damage. If one of those 30 damage weapons hits 2 shots, now this combos. So there's a lot more damage potential here. I don't know how big of an impact that's going to have. It is starting to be not quite a kit killer in the way that it used to be, where the kit was immediately trash once it had it. This thing, there are ways that it can be used, with the Rapid Pro Deco, off of its directs and stuff. So the fact that it's not line of sight is it still needs a lot of compensation for that, and I don't think it has it right now. Like, I don't think the marking utility is worth enough to offset the fact that it's line of sight and still only paints about as much as like a burst bomb does. But it's getting better. It's less bad. Now Zooka, this might be the biggest change in the patch. That I might feel silly for saying that, you know, a few weeks from now, but like 40 to 60 on this is not the, you know, main shots, because obviously you're getting one shot if you get hit by the damage of these. You only need to take this like little bit of indirect damage, and if you take that indirect damage twice, you get 2 shot. It is so easy to hit that indirect damage with this. It's not anywhere near as easy to hit the direct if you need that, but the indirect damage is easy. And now you only need to hit 2 of those. That's not even the entire special. You could completely whiff one and still get the third one and splat someone with it. This is drastically improving the consistency of this at getting splats, and also drastically increasing the chip damage that it's going to do to combo with other stuff. Like, I could, with the Splatter Shot, getting the buffs that will make it less gear dependent, that is, will make it that it has to run less intensify action to get the same accuracy, that might free it up to run more special charge and use a bunch of Zookas. Like, they could turn this thing into, like, a Tri-Zooka bot. That's at least a scenario that I'm considering in my head. Obviously, we need to play it and see how it actually works out in practice. Maybe this still isn't a good enough answer to inkjets or crabs or something. Like, there are a lot of unanswered questions, but shot players, you love this patch because everything about your weapon got better, except for, I guess, the suction bomb, which is already fine. Okay, Inkvac. They buffed things about the Inkvac that are not the main weaknesses of the special, but this strength being better might help. One of the big problems with Inkvac right now is that the shot is just really dodgeable because the projectile speed sucks. And this is a way that they can potentially deal with that. This is very similar to the Reef Slider buff that happened recently, where the radius was expanded drastically. So now it's harder to escape, and there are some situations where you actually will just eat the shot because you can't get away from it in time. And I feel like that might be something that happens with the Inkvac shot now, where it's still not a great special because it's still very vulnerable in the time between when it fully charges and when it can fire. But when it does fire, that shot is a lot more likely to get value. So 50% when it's at minimum and 25% when it was at maximum. So your radius is just generally going to be larger, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to dodge. Still not impossible, probably, especially, again, because it's sort of like a Booyah Bomb, where you don't really dodge it by seeing it land at your feet and then trying to run away. You're probably dead if that happens. But it's because you can see it coming from a really long ways away. You see the charging, you see it getting fired in your direction from really far off, and the projectile speed is pretty slow, and you just kind of preemptively swim out of the way. That's going to be harder to do, and there may be some positions where people actually get caught more than they would be before. So it's kind of like, remember when Tri-Strike got buffed, when its radius got buffed and stuff, and you thought you were safe standing where you were, and now you're not used to it anymore, and you accidentally get caught? That's going to happen a bunch in solo queue for the first couple weeks, but people are going to get used to that, and then we'll see if this has any more utility than it used to. My guess is it's probably not going to change very much of that special's viability. It's still not going to be valuable in competitive play, but it is better, and that is the direction we want it to be moving, at least. Super Chump. Zap players, you did get buffs over here, and you are getting some buffs here. So, again, a damage buff, which is definitely significant. So it was at 60, now it's at 70. So let's consider a couple of things here. For one thing, 70 now combos with any weapon that does 30 damage or more per shot. It also combos with a burst bomb indirect, which is a really common source of chip damage. So you have to respect that a lot more than you have to respect the 60. On top of that, the 35 damage explosion is significantly bigger. So now these things can combo with each other. You can get hit by the direct of one and the indirect of another, and you're actually splatted. Super chumps are going to start splatting a lot more people if they don't actually take the time to shoot them. And I think that's a much better place for them to be right now. In combination with the fact that they paint more, this might feel more like a real special again. I think Zap players should definitely at least experiment a little bit and see if it's feeling like it's having a little bit more of an impact than it used to. Launching this into a fight might actually do something now. Inkjet. While I hate to say it, Inkjet was actually a little bit overwhelming on the last patch. While I love Inkjet to death, double Inkjet on a comp being like heavily considered, Inkjet not having a lot of hard counters in the game, it did make it feel kind of frustrating to play against in some situations. So this is probably a deserved nerf. They've decreased the damage radius of the 50% hitbox. No changes to the 30 damage, so you're still going to be able to chip at someone if they're, running away. You're still going to have the full blast radius there. It's just more of the radius is going to do 30 than 50. So you have to be more accurate to get the full value out of it. Honestly, this sounds like a good buff in my head. This sounds like something that's going to make it a little bit more like skill dependent while still allowing you the same efficacy if used well. This seems fair to me for now. Like, I still want Inkjet to be strong. I still want it to be meta because it's cool and because it's risky and it's aggressive. And that's going to make the game more fun and fast-paced, I think. But taking it down a peg a little, it's not a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. Okay. Points for special. Sometimes it feels like these are somewhat randomly selected, but we'll talk about these. So, Clash Neo it's been one of the worst weapons in the game for a long time, so any buff to it is a good thing. But up until now, I don't think they've made anything 170p. I think it's been between 180 and 210 for everything. Maybe there was a 220 out there sometime, but nothing has been below 180 up until now. This is the first time that they're dipping any lower, and they're doing it on two weapons that are very underplayed right now, on the Clash Neo and the Carbon Deck, or the V Carbon. So that's fine. Is Carbon Roller really the first weapon past the Clash Neo that needed a buff? Probably not, but I mean, it is something that has been seeing barely any use, so it's fair, I think. I would understand if this is Rapid Deco because Inkjet's been so strong lately, although it might be a little overkill when Inkjet itself is also getting nerfed. I don't know. We'll see. But, like, Rapid Pro Deco? It's only getting Killer Whale. It's, like, good, but not great. And it's a blaster, so it's not getting these very fast. It's not like you're running this weapon just to spam those. I don't know why they needed to do this. This feels really random, and if anything, not in the direction that I'd like to see, because this weapon is seeing some use in competitive play, but not a ton. So it's not like buffing it would even be a bad thing. I don't know. Tri Nouveau is wild. The end zap gets it in 180. The Tri Nouveau was already not what you wanted to run if you were just trying to tactical or spam or something. Like, oftentimes this weapon's just going to die before it pops the cooler. Why did they need to nerf it? It's not even, it was seeing some use. It was good. But, like, they didn't need to do this, and if they're going to do something to it, probably not that. I don't understand. Mini splatling is also crazy. Who was using this thing? Like, I don't see people in competitive play using the mini splatling. Maybe, like, someone saw Nyagora playing and he pulled it out because he's just a god on anything he plays, any midline weapon, and he made it look so good that they were like, I'm so scared of the hammers. The hammers are not the part of this kit that you're scared of. What? Some of these feel like they just threw darts at a board and it landed on that weapon. They're like, okay, we're going to do something about that. The ballpoint does not feel that way. The ballpoint has been one of the dominant weapons in the meta for a long time. It is understandable that they're nerfing it slightly. 210p, I think, is totally fair. I don't think it'll even change its place in the meta that much, because there aren't that many weapons that are getting inkjet, and this is by far the best main weapon that's getting inkjet. So this is fine. This will slow down comps that are depending on the ballpoint to get in, which might be a little bit less fun, but I don't think it's going to ruin the weapon. I think it's going to be able to do the same thing that it's been doing. It's just going to be a little bit more balanced in doing it, and it might open up space for some other backline weapons to be able to be a part of the game again. Now we might actually start seeing some chargers come out to maybe counter the inkjets, to counter the ballpoint. The ballpoint is, in part, one of the weapons that's been so valued because it's faster. It can move up and take more aggressive positions, meaning that it can advance sooner than the charger, which needs to make sure that everything is cleared out in front of it before it moves up, because it's just got such a long charge time and everything depends on that charge time. And the ballpoint getting special slower will actually slow it down a little bit and maybe reduce that pace of play just slightly. And the inkjet being just a little bit less consistent at splatting might make it so that that charger is going to be able to get their shot off and not be as strapped for time to hit the shot before they're getting indirected to death. So maybe that's something. I don't know. It's a step in the right direction for sure. Might not be enough to take the ballpoint out of the metagame, but hopefully it'll at least make people consider some other options and increase weapon variety. Made it possible to join a room even when a private battle is in progress if there is a spot available. This was possible in Splatoon 2 for a very long time, and it's incredible that it's only just making it into the game now, but good thing. All right. Nothing super significant that I'm seeing in the bug fixes, just a bunch of standard, like, niche cases where you'd clip into geometry. I'm very interested in the changes to these shooters here. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on those and trying those out, because this definitely might increase the variety of shooters that are being chosen. This might offer some significant alternatives to the splash. That will add to some weapon variety, which was one of the things that they were, looking for. They wanted some extra weapon variety, and they're going to get it if people start considering, say, the V-Shot. Also, moving the ballpoint a couple steps back. So they're targeting the two big, strong, cornerstones of the meta right now, which are the Splash-O-Matic and the ballpoint. And then there are a few weak options that are getting some marginal buffs that may not do too much. But the Zooka is just randomly going to be way more powerful now. Inkvac might be harder to dodge. Super Chumps are worth experimenting with at least. This is definitely the most powerful that the special has ever been. And Inkjet is going to be a little bit less impactful. Probably not too much, but it might be in a better place than it used to be. So overall, W patch, I think, from what I'm seeing here. I don't think there's anything like super unforeseen except maybe the Zooka that could make people upset. Obviously, there are a lot of things that are not being addressed by this patch. That, the Dynamo needs more than this. Clash Neo needs more than it's getting if they're ever going to be competitively viable. But, I didn't see anything that was really in the wrong direction except for like a 10 points per special nerf going on in the points to special changes. So yeah, this seems really pretty solid for a patch. I think this can only really improve things, and I'd hate to be jinxing it right now. We'll see what happens when people get their hands on it, but I'm personally pretty excited to see what's coming from this.